I do support the idea of states' rights. I'm a fan of local governance. I think that the way that every state's elections are so different and that there's a profit motive. Again, these voting machines, whether it's Diebold or whatever the company is that makes the voting machines, there's a profit motive between whoever the Secretary of State is or the governor and whatever company they're using. And there is so much of an appearance of impropriety for me in the mechanism that overall I just has a bad taste. Like it needs to be something that can be universalized. And I do love the idea of doing mail-ins, everybody doing mail-ins. But then here we still have the problem of the machines count the ballots. It's not hand counted. So we have software here. And then even when there's a recount, they just run them through the same machines again. And that does not lead to confidence. We need hand counted paper ballots, and that there needs to be certain universal truths about what constitutes a fair election, even though I support states' rights. So there has to be some sort of balance with that. What do you think?
I agree. Federalizing election it terrifies me, though. It's very, very frightening because we've got establishment people in control. So I don't know if you've read some of the voting act from HR1, S1, the John Lewis Voting Act, all that.
Oh yeah.
That there's language in there that's very disturbing, makes it harder for third party candidates.
Yeah, the poison pill parts of that legislation for sure.
So I don't trust the federal government to run the voting at all. But I agree there should be a little bit more consistency is what I would like to see. But if you leave it up to the states, if you leave it up to the states, then I think I would have more trust in that process than the federal government right now.
Right. No, I don't think they should be controlling it, but I think there needs to be sort of bare minimum standards, sort of like we have it's funny. I got a job where I'm grading bar prep essays for people. And the one I just did was about the Miranda warnings. And so like, there are certain things that we can put into place that are basic standards that get applied by the states. So we could have something like, this is what constitutes a free and fair election according to our, Supreme Court. This is what is a free and fair election. And yeah, the states can decide within that what legislation looks like, but there has to be certain basic that would be part of our Constitution, if that was written out there, like just certain things. And the idea that there's a profit incentive in any way, shape, or form in a conflict of, as far as I'm concerned, is a conflict of interest with all of it. Like there needs to be certain rules about that. The governor and his friends should not be profiting off of any sort of voting mechanism or system. And that's my concern. And I think that's where regulation is needed, not necessarily in terms of the specifics of how everything works, but I think we need some standards.
I agree completely. But that's not the discussion that we're having. I don't hear that discussion at all being had.
I know. That's the problem.
My biggest issue. Yeah. Well, first of all, they're doing the whole voting rights thing because they're trying to cover their asses for the fact that they failed so miserably with Build Back Better, and that they allowed the infrastructure bill, which is a complete corporate giveaway. Let's be honest, it's what it is. And it's also supposed to be basically a pick-me-up from Mr. Pete, because we all know he's going to be the heir apparent.
He's the next one.
There's no universe where I'm voting for that man.
Well, that's what. Well, listen, and we'll get into Marianne Williamson and Nina Turner as sort of like the closing, figuring out what the left progressives may ultimately end up doing. But what always strikes me is that all of this started, this whole pulling the mask off and exposing just how bad things really are, when they literally stole the primary from Bernie in 2016. It was proven.
Yep.
There was no consequence. And of course, this is coming from myself personally, where I immediately got Bernie when he started running in the spring of 15. And there were things that I was seeing right off the bat where I knew they were going to steal this thing from me.
I liked Bernie in 98.
That's going way back. That's going back.
It was me for sure. I wrote a paper on the civil unions versus same-sex marriage, and Vermont and Hawaii at the time were the only two states that had it. So, and I knew about the Burlington mayor.
And I really appreciated what you wrote. I thought it was wonderful, and I appreciated every nice thing that you said about me, Jen. And wonderful things are going to happen in the future, and you might run for office again, and maybe I might support you. You never know. So, what I thought was always so interesting is that we know that the primaries are rigged. And yet you want to talk about voting rights. You're not talking about primary voting rights. You're not making sure that everybody has an opportunity to have open primaries, ranked choice voting, or any of that stuff.
One word. Super delegate.
Super delegate.
Yes.
Super delegate. And by the way, and I've said this, the Democratic Party has no moral ground to stand on regarding voting rights. Sorry, none.
And like you said, we won't even say the word, but they use you know what as a weapon. They're not using it to actually help people.
No.
It is not in their financial interest to help people, to keep them on the hamster wheel.
Yep. I think they're worried they don't want to have what happened to the Republican Party on the left. They don't want a true populist uprising. And that's what the voting rights is about right now for them.
They're trying to get something through that really doesn't have any meaning, but it's a virtue signal. That's all they do. That's all they do is little bits and pieces of virtue signaling. And there are decent pieces of that legislation. It's not entirely bad.
Voting, listen, election day.
There are decent things.
Most
same-day registration is good.
Same-day registration is good. Election day should be a federal holiday. There are there should not. And again, we understand that you don't like gerrymandering, but that's because the GOP prioritizes local politics, and they have taken over 32 state houses throughout the country.
Yep.
And
they were smarter.
And you've only got 18 to show for it. That's because they prioritize what matters, and they want to not do gerrymandering. How's this? There is an organization called Ungerrymandered in Michigan, and it is a completely independent commission, and they have drawn the districts almost perfectly. Imagine that.
There was a rule
districts perfectly when there's an independent commission.
It should be, but like I remember, it used to be like something about like this concave rule. Or a convex rule. It was the convex rule that all districts should be perfectly convex. Like there shouldn't be cutouts or whatever. And I forget. I had some very nerdy friend in college that I think that referred to it as like that, but I don't know if that was ever a thing. But that's how you know. Like, there has to be lines, and the lines have to be somewhere. And sometimes it might be, one county divided in half. Sometimes that's got to happen. But you at least got to do the best you can to keep communities together. Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.